Jeff helps coaches and creators sort through the noise of their business and focus on what matters most.
We touch on Jeff's inspiring story of pursuing a career in medicine only to find his true calling as a business coach.
Most people have untapped potential in their audience. If they're not selling, it's because they're not establishing authority enough. Their audience most likely doesn't even know that they do what they sell. So the first thing is
we talk business tips, content creation, branding, and social media marketing, and the habits and mindset for coaches and creators to maintain their productivity, creativity, and double their income.
Mastering the art of messaging is practicing the art of messaging, right? Like you can't master anything unless you exercise it, unless you practice it. So I think this is probably one of the hardest things to balance as a business owner.
What are some of the mistakes that coaches and creators make when trying to grow their business?
I'd say the biggest mistake in trying to grow their business or grow their revenue is
Welcome back to The Content Era, a podcast by creative entrepreneurs for creative entrepreneurs,
where we share the latest social media strategies, content creation tips, and how to build your iconic personal brand.
My name is Sebastian.
And I'm Jasmina.
Let's dive in. Welcome, Jeff. We're so excited to have you here in the Content Era podcast. We're going to be talking about business, mindset, content creation. Very excited to have you. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Stoked to be here, guys.
Awesome.
So just for some context, Jeff, we met during the Tom Noss Time to Build cohort. Noski's Time to Build.
I do the same thing. I'm like, Noski, tomato.
And we connected through there, and we've had a few conversations when it comes to business and mindset. And it seems like you really have a really good understanding on how to help business owners put their time towards money-making activities and the things that are going to generate them the best results. So really excited to have this conversation with you. But to start off, if we can dive into your story, my first question would be, can you take us back to the moment you decided to not pursue your career in medicine and how you found your true calling?
Yeah, finding your true calling, quote unquote, is messy, in my opinion and experience. And it was one of those moments where I remember I was sitting at my desk in my parents' house at the time, studying for the medical school entrance exam. And I had one of those like moments where it was like the voice of God issue. I call it my moment of conversations with God, but conversations with Jeff. And it was one of those just no, like clear no's. And for a minute, I had this like very unsettled feeling. But I think one of the things that's happened at each stage of my life when I've had this inkling or this notion to do something different, I've had this ability to just be like, like the dust settles. And that one thing I think has been the thing that's allowed me to have a high risk tolerance. So in that moment, I was like, cool, interesting. What does that mean? And eventually I just paid attention to signs, and my cousin-in-law was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and my cousin was cooking a macrobiotic diet for him. So I wanted to learn and study that because his cancer went into remission. The indicator of that specific cancer, the PSA, was way off the charts. It was like over 100. And within 6 months-ish, it went into complete remission. And long story short, he ended up living 19 years longer than they said he was going to live. And so I was like, I want to learn this, because ultimately I wanted to learn how to help people get well. It was one, I was really good at math and science, but two, I had meningitis when I was a kid. And I remember walking to the car with my mom. I was like 13, 14. And I was so pissed because the doctors, it was just like one shitty diagnosis after another. And one guy was like, well, sometimes during puberty, there's inflammation around the brain tissue. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me, bro? Wow. Like, that's what you have to say for the thing that won't let me open my eyes? It's puberty? So part of it was born out of like, these guys have no idea what they're doing. So it makes sense that I was rerouted, right? Because it was born of discontent, not necessarily something that was a moving towards. It was like, I can do it better, which sometimes works out, but ultimately I don't think it does. Mm-hmm. So I was a chef for about 7 years, and then start a live-in private chef for people with late stage cancer. And then I quickly realized about halfway into that there was so much more than food going on. And the people who got well seemed to have something behind their eyes that the others didn't. And I eventually kind of went down the rabbit hole and realized that like, oh, there's this thing called consciousness, and got into like Esther Hicks and Tony Robbins and everything on both sides of the spectrum, like personal development and then like as woo as it can possibly get. And so eventually I went into transformational coaching and got certified in a handful of very obscure technologies called conscious language, sacred body language translations, biooptic holography, and a lot of different things that are very hard to market. So I went out for a couple of years and tried to do that. I was like, wow, this is really tough, and learned marketing because I had to market that stuff. Went back into the company where I got certified and supported them to, over 7 years again, grow that business to multiple millions and to launch roughly 40 products and programs and coach certification trainings and all that kind of stuff. So that was like where I got most of my experience. I basically got paid to learn how to market.
Okay.
Wow. And help
Yeah.
people as you went along, but just in a different capacity than what you had originally set out to do. So this is really like the foundation and the start of your coaching, right? Just helping people in a different capacity than what you originally set out to do as in the medical field. So how did your experience as a macrobiotic chef shape your approach to business coaching?
I mean, I don't think the chefing necessarily shaped my approach to coaching as much as, you know, like when I was transitioned into transformational coaching and had the experience of the difficulty of wanting to help people in that way, and the feeling of trying to do that via content and putting videos out and writing content, whatever else, and then it not working, like that pain really drove me to figure out, like, I need to figure out how to do this so I can get this stuff in the hands of people and help them. And it was kind of this disguised blessing helping my mentor to really grow his business, because I got to help a lot more people in a very short period of time. And it was even one of those things where for I don't know how many years, we drove around the country in his lifted Dodge Ram extended cab pickup with like everything in it to put on a live event. I'm talking like gigantic speakers, the soundboard, the like everything to put on a live event.
Wow.
The binders, the notebooks, all the things like the master copies to get them printed. And it was just one of those like on the ground type things. And what I did in the process was I helped him digitize everything. So I helped him build out all the back end and Infusionsoft and what was it called? Customer Hub, which was the now Keep, formerly Infusionsoft CRM membership area.
Okay.
Right. So like the one thing I would say that I think is synonymous with everything I've done is this desire and value for excellence and precision. So when I was a chef, or when I was in transformational technologies, or even now in business coaching, there's this foundational and fundamental desire for simplicity and excellence. And I think that one of the things that gets most business owners in trouble is this, I don't know if it's a desire for complexity or novelty, but it's this drive to like make shit more complicated than it needs to be.
Amen.
Right? And it's yeah, but it's funny. It's one of those things where it's like, oh, there's this seemingly complex problem, therefore the solution must be complex. But we also know like the same level of understanding or consciousness that created the problem can't be the same one that solves it.
Right.
So simple solutions are usually the thing that works the best.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Well
And
put.
like kind of counterintuitive, right? At first to wrap your mind around, but yeah, the longer you do it, the more you realize that, I guess. And also just why overcomplicate things when you can keep things simple. So that's really interesting that you actually lived with the cancer patients full time, right?
Yeah. So anywhere from like 2 weeks to 6 months was the longest.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. Not many people can say that. I mean, you hear these like takeaways and quotes from nurses in the hospital who were like by the bedside of cancer patients or people who are on their deathbeds, and they have these profound things to share. So what were some of the most profound lessons you learned from working as a live-in private chef for cancer patients?
Yeah, I love that question. The biggest one was to let go. I remember this one guy I worked for in New York City. And he was an attorney and still was when I went and cooked for him, but he shouldn't have been leaving the house. And the guy had lost so much weight that his suit was probably 6-7 sizes too big for him. So it was like, looked like an oversized garment. Say he was maybe, and this is, I'm accentuating it or exaggerating it to some degree, but like, say he was 400 pounds before and he's now 200 pounds. Like it was that much of a difference. Like it was a gigantic suit. And he's still on the subway holding his briefcase, kind of with this intense look, like almost grinding his teeth, like still really, really, really tense, trying to still do things the same way.
Wow.
I'm sure you can imagine where this story is going as this guy eventually passed, right? And contrast that with this woman in Rancho Palos Verdes down the coast in California, just south of LA, a couple of hours. And I remember whenever I was cooking, she would be in the living room on the couch, like looking over the back of the couch. And she was always like very curious, asking questions, and she had like this childlike glimmer in her eyes. And she did really, really, really well and lived a lot longer than they said she was going to live. That moment, like seeing those two side by side, was the number one thing that made me like look into other things, because I was like, yo, similar cancer, two very different people, one's still fighting and holding on. And that guy, I believe it was his niece that contacted me and hired me to come and live in and work for them. So he didn't do it. He didn't initiate it. He didn't want it.
Okay.
He didn't want to change.
Right.
Right. Another thing. Right. So it's like being able to not try and continue to do things the same way and expect shit to change. Right. Like that's just not a great approach.
Yeah. Similarly to how you just said previously about you can't like progress staying in the same consciousness. Like you need to enter a new sort of consciousness or mindset. Right. Mm-hmm. So that makes total sense. So how did your journey into consciousness and healing technologies influence your coaching methods today?
Oh my goodness. I think about this almost every day, and I would say that like most business owners don't even have business problems. Like it literally comes down to personal effectiveness. And part of that is the way they think. And if you think about any habit, like nothing exists independently. Like everything is reinforcing. So if one person has the habit of, let's say, always shortcutting their content and just throwing stuff up and just posting things for the sake of posting to get the post out, they're doing that same thing in a lot of places. It's kind of like the way you do anything is the way you do everything. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that statement. This is slightly different. It's one of those things where everything is connected in some way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. So if you change, that's why when you change one thing, you typically have to change a lot of things, and it kind of starts to unravel this thread. So a lot of times when I'm working with clients, it's a small percentage strategy in what to do, and a larger percentage of how to do it and how to think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Makes so much sense.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. So digging deeper into that, what are some of the mistakes that coaches and creators make when trying to grow their business? When
it comes to specifically, I'm going to go a little bit deeper with that question, right? Like, so trying to make more money, let's say it that way.
Okay.
Right. I'd say the biggest mistake in trying to grow their business or grow their revenue is operating from fear. Right. So huge. Most people, when they operate from fear, meaning like, if I don't, then this, or what if that happens, they're running at a pace trying to figure things out as fast as possible. So I think this is probably one of the hardest things to balance as a business owner, right? It's like, because you have to be driven by, there's necessity, right? Like the psychological drive of necessity. Like we have to be driven that we need to be able to produce. And at the same time, that can't be from a place of I don't have, or what if, or this isn't going to work out, because people feel that, right? Like everyone knows what it feels like to be for someone to try and sell you that's in fear, or that's in lack, or that's afraid that they're not going to make the sale. Like it just feels like shit. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
So
I'd say that's one of the biggest things, if not the biggest thing.
yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to that because I feel like we've all been on both sides of that at some point in our lives. Maybe not you, but I know I have. So
yeah, I definitely
Oh, I've
experienced
been
it
on all the
like,
sides.
yeah.
when I
Feeling
started
frustrated.
my first business, it was very much like that. I had saved up a little bit of money, but I knew I had to get the ball rolling with more business. So I was doing everything I could possibly do to get a next client. And at some point like the energy that you give off in meetings and when you're approaching people is needy, really, in retrospect. And I contrast that to when my business was thriving, and I was able to say no to a lot of opportunities and yes to much bigger opportunities because I was coming at it from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. And it's a fine line to walk when you don't,
Yep.
when you actually like don't have and you need, but you're trying to balance out not coming at things from a place of need. You know what I'm saying?
I do 100%. And the thing that you're talking about as well, Seth, is like this fundamental need for safety and security. All right. So fear, usually, especially as in the business sense, is from the place of like, I'm not going to make it, which is I'm not safe. Right. There's this fundamental, like just this need for safety that if we can't somehow find a way to establish that, we're going to be running on fear, period.
Yeah, so just real quick, like, do you have any advice for how to put yourself in a state of abundance rather than a state of lack, even when you're in the stage where maybe you're starting a new business, you're pivoting into another niche, or just starting over and you are in a place of need, like your bank account's dwindling. But let's say like you believe in like the vision for this new business you want to start, but like you can't help but feel like, oh, like I haven't closed a sale yet, or, so yeah. Do you have any tips for how to overcome that or how to like elevate your consciousness?
Definitely. I call it forward and backward. All right. So looking back, most people can relate and say, oh, I've been here before and it's always worked out. Right. And that's the forward of like, it always works out. So if you can look forward and say like, I know it's going to work out. And if you can look back and say it's always worked out, then you can be right here and be like, all right, cool. You can at least find a way to like calm your nervous system in a way where you can take action based on intelligent action and some form of intuition that's not cloaked in fear and anxiety. Right? Like that's for me personally. And any of these like mindset or consciousness tools and techniques, like they take practice. And the more that you use them and the more like evidence you establish and build, the more context you have that it's going to work. So most people, when they try anything, right, it's like they do it once or twice and like, oh, that didn't work. It's like, really, bro? Nothing works 100% of the time, right? So it's one of those things where you just have to have faith. And even if you look at like scripturally, right, like faith without works is death. Faith with works is life. So it's like doing the thing while having faith is what works. The whole like I'm going to sit here and manifest shit or like mindset my way into something without doing anything never worked and never will.
No.
Yeah. Wow. So true.
What are some of the ways that somebody can practice or incorporate practice into an everyday routine that you could recommend?
As far as like getting out of fear?
Yes.
I mean, I think most of it is having, like you have to make sure that because biology has to be on your side, right? Like most people are over caffeinated, underslept, under exercised, and sit in front of screens all day long. Like it, again, simplicity, right? And yeah, I'll raise my hand as well, but it's like, I literally have a fucking note on my iPhone that says, take a walk, put your feet in the grass, get in the sun, call a friend.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to do that after this.
Like, could it literally be? But here's the thing. When we're hijacked, we're like, well, I got to do this, and I got to send this email, and I got to write this thing, and I got to make this video, and I got to do these scripts, and I gotta. And when you start to feel that, it's like, bro, is it really going to hurt to take 30 minutes right now to save hours or days or weeks, I'm pretty sure that's going to pay off in the long run. So it starts with like, right now my sport is sleep. I get to bed, and you guys know this, right? Like I'm in bed at like 8:30 at the latest every single night, and I'm up between 3:30 and 4:30 in the morning.
What?
Wow.
I did not know that. So early?
Oh, I thought we had chatted about that last time we were doing the collab. And
I remember you saying the
the
8:30 bedtime, but not the 3:30 wake up call.
Oh, that's an early wake up.
I don't
Wow.
even think
It's
I
just
would be
it's just when my
functioning.
body wakes up. I don't do an alarm. So it's like I wake up and I'm just ready to rock, right? And then there's training and exercise, like whatever it is, like do something physical. Like
Yeah.
move your damn body. Like we are meant to move. We are not meant to sit still all day long. And it's
true.
kind of a catch-22 because it's like we got to get shit done. And at the same time, it's like if you're running yourself ragged and you're feeling uninspired and it's hard to generate ideas, it's because your biology is probably working against you.
Wow, so true. So true. And it's really accurate the word that you used, hijacked.
Yeah.
Because when you said that, I was like, it's heavy, but
I mean,
it's
even
true.
when you look at addiction, right? They say HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. When people reach for a substance, it's because they're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Why is it any different for a normal person who's not addicted, who's really addicted to their phone or whatever else?
Yeah. Or you might not even be hungry. You might just be like, what's the word? Like nutritionless, like empty calories. You might be overeating and maybe that's your addiction, but that's a conversation for another time.
It is.
Wow.
So with that in mind, how do you help your clients double and triple their revenue while working less?
That's a great question. The first thing is like most people have untapped potential in their audience, right? And that comes from either like if people are doing a personal brand model where they're talking about like a lot of different things and they also have some type of offer, if they're not selling, it's because they're not establishing authority enough, right? It's that their audience most likely doesn't even know that they do what they sell, and they're not making enough invitations or offers or having enough conversations. So the first thing is like, cool, how do we maximize the audience you have? Because the first thing people think when they're not making enough sales is they're like, I need more people. It's like, what about what's right in front of you? Like, what about the 4,000 or 5,000 people you have in your audience right now, right? So that's number one is like, how do we optimize and maximize what's already here? The second thing is I was just having a conversation with a client today and she's like, oh, I got this thing and I got this offer and I got this. And I'm like, yeah, no. How much time do you have in a day? Well, I got this and I got this. Cool. We're going to pick one or two of those things. All right. Like too many offers, no matter what vertical or offer, most people, each offer in their business can be a business in and of itself.
Right.
Right.
I hear that.
And it's like when you think about the content that needs to be produced, the side of delivery and everything else, there's a lot that goes into having an offer or one specific vertical in your business. So the next thing is like really look at what is it that I want to deliver? Most people, this is fascinating, and I've been here as well. Most people are trying to sell something that they don't even want, they dread delivering. Think about that. Like, I'm going to sell this coaching. Do you want to show up on calls? Oh, I fucking hate calls.
Yeah.
Like, I hate having this thing on my calendar where I got to show up and talk to people. Good luck selling that. Right? So it's like, which one do you want to deliver? Do you feel compelled to deliver? I'm not the guy that's going to be like, you got to be excited. It's got to be your bliss. And it's got to be your passion. Like, you won't hear me say that shit. I do believe that that's an ingredient, but it's not what's important. I honestly think you should lead with whatever you have the most skill in, right? Because at the end of the day, if you're a transformational coach, you have to be skilled in transformational coaching, right? You can't just like get on a call and be like, hey, change your life. Nah. Like, it doesn't work that way. There has to be like some type of skill. So that's the second place after like, what can I deliver and do I want to deliver is like, where do I have the skill that I can actually build authority in? Because it's not that you're not establishing authority. It's maybe that you don't have any.
Right.
Right.
So build some damn skills if you don't have them. And if you do have them, let's build an offer around what you have skills on. right? Like we've seen this all, right? Like the ikigai types thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like what you're good at, what the world wants and what you can get paid for type thing.
Yeah. And also
Right.
simplify, right?
And all day. It's got to be simple. If it's not simple, I'm not talking about it.
Just
No,
like, just strip it back and, start with the basics and then maybe build back up, right? Build back better.
So those are the two like business things. The other one is really just understanding your like personal rhythm and your productivity, right? Like I love creators. I was the guy who wanted to double major in pre-med and studio art. So I have both of them very well hooked up. Like I'm super ultra creative, musically inclined, all of these things, but I'm also extremely structured and organized. But I'm also extremely structured and organized because I understand the pain of not being organized.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And the next thing is really just understanding, like, how do you get shit done? How do you move projects forward? Most people set goals and they're like, I set the goal. Cool. What are you doing every day to get there? These things. I'm posting content. Okay, cool. How'd it do? I don't know. Did you measure backwards? No. Did you assess at the end of the week? No. This reminds me of the last collab we did. Did you, did you do these things? They don't have a plan for how to move the needle in the business, right? Because it's not just this plan that gets set. It's how do you execute and carry through, right?
Yeah.
So those things alone are where I focus. And then when there's a lack of attention or focus or getting things done, it's like, all right, cool. How do we track and get this on track, right? How do we fix this thing? Right. So it's like moving around these different pieces and dialing in on each of them. And those ingredients or areas are the things where I focus the most that almost always result in at least doubling their income.
Wow. That's the second time in the last week where I hear something along those lines. So it's really, it's sticking out to me. We had a conversation with Sean Cannell last week from Think Media, and he was saying, or taking the approach of, you set your goal and then you have to deconstruct the steps to be able to get there, because a lot of people have a goal and then they work forward towards it. And he's saying it's much better to have your goal and then work backwards, so you know the steps, and then work forward through those steps. Because you can get to that point where, like, what are you doing to achieve that goal? And you're like, oh, I'm posting content, like you said, right? But how are you posting content, and what's the strategy behind the content, and how is that going to feed into the end goal and the business that you want to build and the lifestyle that you want for yourself? So that really resonates.
Yeah, reverse engineer.
Reverse engineer, that's the one. I was looking for the word.
Can you share a success story of a client who significantly transformed their business through your coaching?
The first one that came to mind is a client, Greg Scheinman. His brand is the Midlife Male. He was actually just on a billboard in Times Square.
What?
And he went
Congrats,
from
Greg.
pretty much zero to within 18 months being at, I want to say it was 350 within 18 months.
Wow.
350K.
Nice.
And he had already had a podcast. He was already posting content, and he had successful businesses before that. So this is not like, some miracle or act of God. This is someone who understands discipline. He's an older guy. He's had successful businesses in entertainment and insurance. And he actually transitioned out of the insurance business in the time that we were working together into full-time being a content creator, podcaster. And now he's building a gigantic brand. He's way past that. And he's just absolutely crushing it.
Wow, right on. Congrats on
Wow.
that. And by the way, I saw that you worked with Adam Roa. I think I'm saying his name right. Yeah, he's
it's Adam Roa.
I think he's from my hometown or somewhere around there, but he's like the spoken word poet, right? How did you guys work together? How did you link up?
Adam is a good buddy of mine, and we met through Preston Smiles, another mutual friend, motivational speaker. He's more into he's an abundance coach. He's doing a lot he's actually publishing a book or coming out with a book on abundance. Really great in that area. But Adam needed help launching a breakup course actually at the time. I helped him I was doing a lot of done for you marketing type stuff. So I helped him with the execution of the launch and the landing page and the messaging, and then the pacing and the delivery of all of the assets leading up to the launch of the course.
Oh, very cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
What's that video of his that went viral? Something about love. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking now. Do you remember, or?
There was a couple. There was the one about love, but which also had the stuff like the beauty industry stuff in it, and like he had like this reddish colored hat on. I can't remember exactly what the video was.
Something like love yourself or choose love. Anyways, I'll have to look that up. Okay, what are your top 3 tips for simplifying one's business to achieve better work-life balance?
That's kind of a trick question. I don't necessarily believe in work-life balance. I think that most of us who want to achieve results in anything, right? Like I'm an endurance athlete. Like my shortest marathon as an ultra marathon is 31 miles. And the last one was 50. The one before that was 62 miles, right? So in kilometers, that's 100 kilometers and 50 kilometers and whatever else. So I'm not really the balance guy per se, but what I will say is that, and I've heard Alex Hormozy say this, and I'm not a gigantic fan of Alex. Alex, love you, but I don't love your approach. Is right? It's he works until he's tired, and then he'll watch a movie or do something else, and then he'll start working again. And it's one of those things where it's like, there's the things like when you work, when you love what you do, you'll never work another day in your life.
Yeah.
And I don't agree with that per se, but there's a thread of truth in a lot of these phrases, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, I want to, like last night I got home, it was like 5:30. I had something to eat and I had like a bunch of ideas. So I sat down for hours at my computer, just writing and redoing like my avatar type stuff and just recalibrating some things in the business. And I did that right until I went to bed. And it's like, that's just what needed to happen. And I think having the freedom to be nimble and be able to move and do what needs to be done when it needs to be done in alignment with your goals. Because here's the thing, right? The old model is you work 9 to 5, you chill at night, you hang out and dick around on the weekends, and then you retire. You get tired again, right? And it's like, God, no thank you, right? So for me, I don't particularly subscribe to that model. So when I look at it, I go, find something that works for you, right? Like for me, and this will be tip number 1, is personal rhythm, right? Like for me, that means waking up pretty ridiculously early because I love those like dark hours of the morning. I work until I'm done, which is like 4 or 5 hours is my morning focus block. And then I go train. I go run, I work out, I do whatever, come back, usually meditate for 30 minutes to an hour or get some sun. And then I hit the work again. And then some nights I'll go out, some late afternoons I'll go out, and some I won't. So it's like that rhythm has worked really well for me. And that's also changing right now because I can feel it and I'm starting to feel kind of like, I need something different. So now it's pivoting into a new routine, right? Mm-hmm.
So would you say part of that is scheduling it in, making sure, like you said, you have notifications on your phone, like, go outside, take a walk. So would you say like that's
well,
part
it's
of
not necessary.
balance?
That's more of like a cheat sheet, right? So that's the thing of like when you feel like shit or when you have negative thinking, do these things, right? It's like that's so I don't go, oh well, I need to do more work and I need to do this. Is no, you just need to go outside, bro.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. This is more like these things are on my calendar of like, it's time to eat. It's time to go to bed. It's time to go to the gym. It's time to do your morning work block. Like those are things that are fixed in my schedule. And if things come across my desk or if I get the message that someone's coming in town or if something's happening, it's like, cool. If that's aligned with building a relationship that I want to build or getting to a goal or like doing something for fun that I want to do, I'm going to go do it because I can. Mm-hmm. Like I'm not going to guilt myself and think I should be doing something else when I want to do this other thing.
Okay.
So I think the number one thing is, find a rhythm that works for you and that you can justify.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. What 2 other tips do you have for that?
If any,
Mm-hmm.
for the work-life balance?
Yeah. I think, find a way to like have a form of balance, meaning like you can't sit and work 24/7, right? So it's
Unless
like
you're Alex.
if what's that? Only if
Unless you're
Alex, yeah,
Hermosi.
right? Yeah. I think the other thing is like this second tip, like you can't always be working. I think it's paramount that people have some type of physical practice, right? Like you don't have to be a runner or a lifter or whatever, figure skater. I don't know why that came to mind. That's hilarious. Or a mountain biker, but like have something that you're doing consistently that challenges your body, because like if you don't use it, you lose it, right? It's like most people feel like shit because they don't push their potential. And it's not that they're stuck in their business, it's that they're physically just like stagnant, right? So I think if anything, having balance in life means getting your body moving, period. And I think the third thing, just to go back to my roots, right? It's like eat as close to nature as possible, right? I can't remember who it was. He said, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. I'm like, that's good. It's a great way to think about it, right? And it's like, find a way to nourish your body that gives you energy, right? Like most people are eating to suppress, in my opinion, right? Like they're eating to stuff down, or they're eating to like, get their fix. And I think that finding something that gives you natural energy and doesn't take it, because digestion is a very energetically taxing, right? Especially like huge, heavy meals all the time. So like a form of balance is making sure that you're nourishing your body properly.
Yeah.
On your second point, I was reading in your bio that it seems like you've always had some sort of fitness regimen, bodybuilding originally, right? And now you're doing the ultra marathon. So how have you seen that positively affect your business approach as well?
Oh my goodness. The moment when things started to click massively for me was when I ran my first ultra marathon. Because it's binary. Like if I have a plan typically for the distance that I run, like 3, 4, 5 months is how long my training block is. And if I have a training every day on the calendar, whether it's mobility, running, or lifting, I can't look back and go, oh, well, I did 3 training runs in 5 months. Like I should have done a good race. No, it's like, did I do the work or did I not? And if I did, how did I place? If I placed good, it worked. If I didn't, it didn't work. Do something different, right? So it's like, that was the moment where I like physically got into my body of like, oh shit, there's got to be a plan, and there's got to be retrospective, or there has to be this thing where we measure backwards. Because if you're not doing that, are you really improving?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And you also mentioned in your story that when you ran your ultra marathon, it was also a very difficult financial time for you with facing eviction. But at the same time, you found the ultra marathon to be the kind of like the habit that pushed you forward towards that next step that you really needed, right? Tell us more about that.
If I wasn't running at that time, I would have been worried. Let's say it that way. Like, I think my mind would have ran away, maybe pun intended. But like, I remember like straight up, I had gotten asked to leave my place at that time. And I went to a friend's place the next day. It was like 2:00 in the morning. I went to a friend's place, and the next day I still went to the trail, still ran 10 miles on very little sleep. And I felt like $1 million. So it's like, in the moment, it didn't make sense. And also in the moment, I was like, yo, are you really going to go fucking run this trail right now? Like, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. I was like, bro, it's not going to kill you to go run for an hour and 20 minutes. Just go get outside. It was in North Carolina. It was around the Asheville area. It was in Bent Creek. It was down in this really wooded area and awesome trails. Nature's great. It was like a forest bath, and it worked out fantastically. Like, it kept me, like, it was an anchor. It was the thing that kept me moving forward, because it was the only thing at that point that was consistent for me.
Right. Yeah, that's powerful. Consistency physically, because like money is a human creation, you know, commerce and stuff. Yeah, it's something that's kind of ingrained into us trading goods, services, or favors or work for people. But at the same time, in our economy now, there's just such a heavy weight on making money, on the necessity of having money to live, that it does separate you from that physical self, right? Money is a man-made thing, but our bodies are the vessels that we have. And I think, yeah, that really resonates. Having that consistency in your self can reflect into your business as well.
Yeah. And it was also like a no excuses plus this like extra switch of overdrive, right? It's like in a race that's, 31 to 60 to 100 miles, it's like you have to find another gear at some point, right? There's going to be moments where you're like, I'm done. I hate this. I can't run anymore. This hurts. And it's like, cool. I don't care. Keep going.
Right.
Yeah, I can see how endurance sports like that really train your mind,
100%.
to be, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, just resilient.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was just going to say, let's switch gears and talk a little bit about content creation, because that's obviously a big part of what you do as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. How important is content creation in building a successful coaching business for yourself?
It's important. I think the biggest realization I had is that content's not everything, that it's a bridge, right? So it's like, if you think of this in like a structure type way, right? You have the message that you're putting out, or a message I'm putting out, and there's me and my services, and there's a person on the other side. And the content you're putting out is meant to obviously educate, inspire, and help build authority, but also build trust, right? So like for me, content in the beginning was this thing that I was like, all right, I got to do this thing so I can make sales. And then eventually I was like, yo, this is exhausting. I just want to make content, period. And I started to make content. I was like, oh, this is better. And then around the time of, that transition that we just talked about with running and everything else, I started to realize, and I wish I'd realized this a lot sooner, is that like, oh, I've been way too vague with my brand and I've got to get really specific. So I went back to my roots and I was like, oh, I'm really good at marketing. Like, how about I just teach marketing? I had this hang up for a while where I was like, I don't want to be the coach that coaches other coaches. That's just
Coaches.
But then I was like, but that's how I got into the damn industry. Like, I was a fucking marketer, right? This was my conversation with myself. This is how I talk to myself sometimes. And so I was like, bro, go hard in that area. Like, that's what you're good at. Just do that. And then that's when things started to work, right? And that's where the hard skill conversation came in. It's like, these are where your skills are. So like, content is, I think too many people, and this is not like a poo-poo on content. Obviously, like, we need content. It's the marketing vehicle. But I think too many people look at content as this shallow thing. Of like, I got to post content. And it's like, I'll just get the post up there. It's like, done is better than perfect and blah, blah, blah. I had the thought today. I was like, yo, we need more people that are perfectionists with their content. Like, I think we've gone too far in the other direction of like, oh, don't be a perfectionist. Not you guys. You guys are epic content creators, and it's like, you could probably be less perfect because your shit's really good.
Oh,
but I'm talking about like the vast majority of people. It's like they just throw content up, and it's like, look, yo, you put a little bit more time into your content, not in the actual like creating of the content, but like what you put into it. Right? Like the ideation of it, like sit with the idea for a little bit longer before you just regurgitate the shit.
Yeah.
Right. It's like this half-baked, like unprocessed thing. It's like, oh, I heard this thing. I'm going to go say it on a video. It's
Right.
like, cool.
Wow. Damn. Honestly, I have not. That's a hot take. I haven't heard that take before, or I'm sure people talk about it, but yeah, that's a first. Because I mean, especially coming off from 2023 when all you saw was like 5-second looping reels that said read the caption. I mean, that's a perfect example, I think.
How long did those last? People are still doing them here and there, but most people hate them.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then I think it's up to, us and like leaders in the space who will say it outright because it needed to be said. And then finally, the more people talk about it and yeah, the more people can actually realize like, okay, maybe I should be doing something a little bit more intentional with my content and with my time. So
yeah, I told Jazz, I'm not gonna dance on camera because it's a trend or something like that.
sometimes
I
I wish
kind of
you
wanted
did a
to see
little.
that. I'm disappointed to hear that. So.
Maybe I will once. Maybe by popular vote, I may one time. But
Okay, good.
But at the same time, I'm trying to find a nice way of putting this, but I don't want to like prostitute my content and just give myself out for the sake of getting a little bit of attention and selling out in that way, because like I'd rather not put out content than put out garbage. And for example, like these last couple of weeks, we haven't been posting on short form. We have been on long form, but I just reached this, I think we both reached this exhaustion of putting so much time and effort into short form content, where I also don't feel fully satisfied in whether it's my ability or whatever the reasoning is, to communicate the full value of my message. And so that's why we're doing that big pivot into more long form YouTube content, because I want to focus on the value versus the clicks and the views and the traffic. I know the traffic's going to come, but I'd rather high quality traffic than just high volume traffic. And yeah, like that really resonates.
There's also the issue of not being able to go deep enough with short form content, right? And trying to squeeze everything in a minute or a minute and a half. And yeah, I feel like I just can never quite get the point across. That being said, I need to, practice my long form, going deep into topics, content creation. Because for me, I'm not like, I don't have a background in that. I think you do a little bit, right? You've been on YouTube for a number of years, on and off.
Yeah, I feel much more comfortable. And I had a podcast for 5 years. So like I feel very comfortable in long form content. Like my succinct reels are because I have ridiculously exercised that muscle to the point where I'm like, cool, I got it. I can do it. But like, there's nothing bad, in my opinion, like about short form. It's like a snack, right? Like snacks are okay. But if you just eat snacks all the time, are you going to feel good?
Yeah. Are you going to be nourished?
No, you need a fucking meal. Yeah, exactly. Are you going to be nourished? No. If you consume 20 pieces of short form content with these ridiculous transitions, right? Not just the like water kicking and then the thing and the screen cut and the person falling and the like, oh my I'm just talking about it. My brain's like short circuiting. Like people are like, I'm anxious. I deleted Instagram. Stop watching these fucking ridiculous reels all day long.
Yeah.
That's why. You're snacking on things that have zero substance. Can you tell I have a little energy about this topic?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yo, it's unreal though. But yeah, I got a little off track there.
Well, nonetheless, we know that content creation is still important, and it definitely
Hugely
can be
important.
beneficial to business owners and coaches.
What I'm trying to say by that is, I think that there is a need. Dan Coe said this recently. It was funny. I kicked myself because a month and a half before he published the article talking about like this Renaissance, I was looking into like, why did the Renaissance happen? And like I was researching the Renaissance because I think we're in that time. We're in this like content Renaissance where it's like it's been this like, thing that people feel is a necessary evil, but like the point is to connect with people, to provide value. Some of it's entertainment, yes. Some of it's education. But I think that we've lost like the North Star when it comes to producing content. And for me, it's about like coming back to like, it's an art sometimes. And sometimes it's teaching. And sometimes it's supposed to be funny. But it's like, it's not just supposed to be funny all the time unless you're a comedian. Right. So it's like, I've got nothing against short form content. I just think we've gone way too far into the direction of entertainment and lost touch with what the true purpose is. And the reason people are like, I'm quitting this and I'm deleting the app. And it's like, you're just abusing it. Come into right relationship with it and find a balance that works.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
It's like as consumers participating in short form content, we've allowed to lower the barrier of entry. It used to be where people that would create content would make high quality videos or have high value videos, and then it seems like at some point these 3-second reels snuck their way in, and content that's not value driven. Entertainment's still value, but it's not always nourishing value. What was the quote from the other day? People consume content to solve problems, whether it's boredom or needing to learn something. And I feel like, is it that people are just so bored that there's this huge influx of entertainment based content that is really mind numbing? Like when I think about that, I think of like TikTok and the way that TikTok is positioned in the States, which is, I think it's like a pest almost that's just infiltrating people's minds and making people stupid. And because people want to consume that content, I guess, like they've lowered the bar of what type of content they want to allow into their life.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be
there's
that
actually,
way.
there's plenty of research too on that. Like, if someone's in a state of pain, right? Like if someone's feeling emotional pain, going on Instagram or TikTok and scrolling will suppress that pain.
Yeah. And give you dopamine hits.
Exactly. So it's just a really ineffective, it's an effective coping mechanism if you think of effective as suppressing an emotion, but like it's ineffective in the grand scheme of things. And I think that like what drives the algorithm and what drives content that people want to consume is emotions running rampant.
Yeah. It's like a painkiller versus nourishment.
100%. Yeah. It's like treating the symptom of pain as opposed to feeding the thing that needs to be fed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well said.
Do you have any clients that are still, or maybe even friends or people in your life that still have sort of a resistance to content creation? And if so, what strategies do you recommend for coaches and creators to overcome resistance to content creation?
Yeah, I got a great one. Sorry, that's not supposed to sound sarcastic, but it is in a way. I was going to do a video on this today, and then I didn't because it wasn't fully formulated, but I'll talk about it a little bit. Right?
Formulate
it. And I used to, yeah, exactly. So I used to do this with myself, and that's where a lot of these things come from. It's like, I don't really feel like creating content, right? It's like, what do you do? I go, what's the other option? Well, I need to create content because if I don't, cool, don't create content. Like, but I want to sell stuff and I want to market and I want to express myself and I want to create. Cool. Then fucking figure it out. Right? And it's like,
straight up.
It sounds crass and it sounds kind of like brash, but it's also one of those things where it's like, cool, if you don't want to create content, don't do it. Like, don't do the business, go do something else. Because it's like, if you ask yourself, like, what are the other options? Well, I could, like go to networking events and do it that way, or I could create some content. And I can learn some skills because it's like, look, if you got to create content, you have to figure out how to do copywriting to some degree. You have to figure out how to communicate. Okay. You have to figure out to some degree how to sell. Tell me those aren't useful skills. Like convince me those aren't useful skills.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's like the skills you need to create great content. And then if you want to take it even further, it's like maybe you want to get into more like cinematic quality content, or you want to like really curate like some dramatic music and like deliver a meaningful, heartfelt message, right? It's like, like why not? Right? It's like a mini movie. Okay. So it's like, for those, I have had some clients in the past, and I have one right now where she was originally like, I just want to do maybe like one piece a week. I was like, all right, cool. You didn't pay me X thousands of dollars to produce one piece of content a week. And if that's what you want to do, I got to be straight up. You're not going to see results. So you might as well go do something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You asked, what's the
and
alternative? Get a
I
9
told
to
her,
5.
I was like, what else would you rather do? Well, I'd rather just like, have fun. I wanted to do, okay, cool. Go have fun. Here's your money.
Some tough love from Jeff.
Well, but I mean, it's
Jeff.
at the end of the day, it's
That's
like,
true.
I have other ways, but these are also people who it's like, they're in the spiritual space, and it's like you could coach them, and it's like sometimes they just don't need to be coddled.
Totally.
Yeah, a recent perspective I heard on it during the summit last week was, why are you creating, or why do you want to create content in the first place? And that being kind of like the center of the problem around maybe not being able to or wanting to or whatever mental block you have to not create it. And when the answer is self-serving, that's when you really encounter all the reasons why not to. But when the answer is not self-serving, but you're trying to help somebody, then it's okay if you stumble. It's okay if your lighting is horrible. It's okay if your audio needs some improvement, because you're there to serve somebody else. And you're going to get better on the way. But if you're standing in the way, and I don't want to put a label on it, I just can't think of an alternative word, but like selfishly get in the way of that, right? Putting yourself and your ego or how you look or how you come off get in the way of you serving people, then the approach is wrong. And from that point of view, it makes content creation so much harder, right? If you're out there creating content to serve somebody, then, you know, easier said than done, but it is a little bit easier than when you're trying to serve yourself.
That's why it's so important to
I love that,
get clear on your why. You know, if you have a clear mission and are creating with intention, and like if your intention is to, you know, give back or serve others or solve other people's problems, then I feel like it's just, you know, it will drive you and it will make you like turn on that camera and do it, rather than like if it's self-serving, then like, yeah, who are you trying to impress, I guess.
And that's where authenticity really comes in, because you're bringing people onto the journey, not to the end result, right? It's the story of you working through those hardships and improving yourself that draws people in. It's not just the result. And I think that's why in marketing in general, I grew this business to this much is less appealing now than it was like a couple years ago, because now people want to see I am building a business to this amount of money, or I am working towards this end result, and come join me through the journey, because there's more to learn about that than there is about the result itself.
Yep. Dude, I love that you just said that though too, because there's this, I've said this a couple times and I've had a few people challenge me on it. And I'm like, whatever. But that's why it's oftentimes easier to learn from somebody who's just a few steps ahead of you than it is someone who's light years ahead of you, right? So it's like the person who's got like hundreds of thousands of followers and making tens of millions of dollars teaching somebody who's just getting started. It's like, I don't think that works great. Right. And I'm not saying that you should learn from somebody who just like learned 3 days ago. But what I am saying is that, someone who's closer and more relatable, it's easier to learn because there's more context and there's more relatability, whereas the other one seems so far out of reach. And I think we're coming into this recalibration where it's like, you get to see over the shoulder and it's like done with you type thing, instead of like, let me show you. And I love the voice you did because I do the same thing. It's like, let me show you what I've created and you can too. Right?
Yeah.
Just like that.
Totally. It's interesting to hear different people's perspectives, because actually our last guest was kind of saying the opposite, but for him he was more so touching on like courses. Like he's like, I'm only ever going to learn from someone who has a minimum of 4 years experience in that subject and it creates a course, rather than like, like that's his personal qualifier. But hey,
100%.
Different people, have different thresholds. So,
but to contextualize it, we were talking about, we asked the question of, and I'll ask you the same question, but when do you, in your opinion, when do you think a creator should start monetizing? And the answer he gave for context was, it's kind of a double-sided answer. It's like, you should monetize you could monetize as early as possible, but also make sure that you have tangible experience to drive the value of whatever you're monetizing. So if you're just starting out, don't create like a 7-part course, because it's like, dude, you've been in it for 6 months, And that's kind of the double-edged thing. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I love that question. I think that you should monetize as soon as you can produce results, period. Right? It's like, if you have value to provide that somebody can monetarily, I don't mean monetarily benefit from, like get an ROI in terms of money, but like if you can help somebody save their relationship, or if you can help somebody to do something in business, right? Even if it's niche, like copywriting or whatever, if you have a tangible skill, it's like you can monetize right away if you have something to teach or coach on. Now, the caveat is, my personal take on this is that I think too many people are like, well, I want to do something that doesn't require me showing up. I personally believe that you should support somebody one-to-one. If you're coaching, if you want to do group coaching, you should not start with group coaching. You should start with one-to-one. And then when you have overflow, do it in group. Because it's like to do something that's you're just starting to like accumulate results in and work with people on, to do that en masse, in my opinion, is irresponsible. I think it's just a really bad move. There are some things that lend itself better to doing en masse. And at the same time, if you don't have the like experience of supporting people to move through that one-to-one, I don't think you have any business doing that en masse. My personal experience.
Mm-hmm. I would actually
Same thing
agree.
with a course. If you're going to create a course from like, oh, I've done this thing a couple of times by myself in a vacuum, I'm going to create a course on it. It's like, bro, come on, don't do that, please. Right? Same thing. It's like, maybe you have like a little small group where you incubate, the idea and you help a few people through it, like a beta, maybe like small, like 5-6 people, and you accumulate some results and see where the sticking points are, and then turn it into a mini course and then bring that into a bigger course. Everyone's trying to move too fast, in my opinion. There's two sides. It's like, I want to go from 0 to hero overnight, or I'm going to go slow as fuck and take forever and doubt myself along the way. Right? There's not a lot in between, in my opinion. Right?
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So it's like the ones that are like 0 to hero, I think that's a generalization, Jeff. I think in most cases, or in a lot of cases, that's more ego than anything, of like, oh, they pump themselves up. They're going to do this and do it on a big scale. And they maybe have a big vision and they want to stretch into that vision sooner than later. But I think sometimes that comes with its repercussions. And then I think on the other side, the ones that wait too long, one of the worst things that you can do, in my experience and opinion, when you have a lot of doubt, is wait. It's like a breeding ground for doubt. Mm-hmm. It's like bacteria, right? Like if you this is such a gross example, but you'll get it from me saying this. If you go for a run in 100-degree weather and you leave a pair of sweaty shorts on the floor, it's going to grow bacteria.
Yeah.
It's going to smell, and it's going to get funky as fudge, right?
That's a real visual example there. Thanks for that.
Right? It's going to get so funky. It's going to get gross. Same thing with doubt. You let it sit. You let it brew. You give yourself a whole bunch of reasons why not, why I can't, why it's hard, why I'm going to fail. It's going to build. It's going to momentum. It's the law of momentum. It will build in the wrong direction.
For sure. Wow. Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. And I can attest to that too, because I used to be a huge overthinker, analysis paralysis in almost everything. And I'm still working through that. Seb is actually like helping me a lot, and just having like a business partner who's so not like that. Just constantly reminding me, like, just make a decision. Like, he'll like purposely put me on the spot. For example, if we're trying to choose a restaurant to eat at, or like type of food we want to eat, like just pick 3, 2, 1, go. And I'm like, okay. So yeah.
I'll give you options, but you still got to choose.
Yeah.
Because either way, I'm happy eating whichever one.
So yeah, don't wait, just act. Just take action for sure.
I saw something the other day. It was like, one of the worst things you can do on something that's changeable is not decide.
Yeah.
Right. So like decide faster if you can just change it. And one of the worst things that you can do on something that you can't change is decide too fast. Right. Mm-hmm. And I love that, because it's like, oh, if it's this huge thing, it's like, take a little bit of time. Right. I think too many people are like, oh, I'm going to change my entire business. It's like, really? Give it a minute. Fucking sleep on it.
Yeah.
Right? It's like,
That's
I
true.
got to redo my website. I'm going to start a new social media account. I'm going to like do this whole new offer. And it's like, 5 weeks later, they're on to the next thing.
Yeah, and I would say more
Right.
often than not, those kinds of decisions are more like emotional based, right? Because again,
Yes.
I have an experience doing that also. I was like,
Yep.
going through some emotional time with like an ex-boyfriend or whatever. And I bought this $2,500 course in impulse. And guess what? 2 weeks later, I didn't even touch it. I've never opened it ever again. So, and
Nice.
the exact same thing. I was like, I'm going to change my life. I'm going to start a new business. And it was in a complete... Funny enough, it was in the coaching consulting industry, consulting.com, if you're familiar.
Very
Sam
familiar.
Ovens, yeah.
Formerly Sam Ovens, currently Rian Doris of also partnered with Steven Kotler. Yeah, I'm a dork, I know. But
Yeah.
I know it well. Yeah.
I mean, his stuff was good, but I was just like not mentally ready in any way, shape, or form. So
And
anyway,
if you're not ready, that's not the cup of tea for you, because you think I'm brash. He's brasher.
yeah,
Anyways.
he's a strange individual, but hey, very successful. But all
Yeah,
the power
the
to him.
question comes up of what's the real cost of not doing something, waiting on it, or choosing or going down the wrong path, and how much that could cost you as well. So that's either trying to act too fast or not acting at all.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think of that question a lot when it comes down to decision making. It's like, if I got to make a decision, I got to make it, and I rather make it than be in a position where I have to make it and make the wrong decision then.
True.
Yep. And the reality is too, we're going to be faced with times where we have to make fast decisions, and we're going to make the fucking wrong decision. In the moment, it's going to feel wrong, and right after it may feel wrong. But like, again, going back to the thing of like how to create certainty and security and not act out of fear, things always work out, period. And what is the movie? Slumdog Millionaire, maybe? Like, it always works out in the end, and if it's not the end, or if it hasn't worked out, then it's not the end yet, or something like that.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember what movie it's from or what exactly the saying is, but it's something along those lines of like, it always works out in the end, and if it hasn't worked out yet, it's not the end, or something of that nature.
Tell that to someone who got hit by a bus. Just kidding. That's terrible.
It is, but it's like, yeah, they're not here anymore, but maybe no, I'm not going to even go there.
Sorry, morbid joke. Okay, moving on. Sub just looked at me in like horror. Like, what did you just say?
That's all right. It happens.
On the topic of leveraging your experience and the testimonials and what the results that you've created for people and yourself, what's your take on how can coaches and creators effectively leverage their personal story in their content to connect with their audience?
Yo, I love that you asked that. I think personal stories, first of all, your story is the one thing that differentiates you more than anything else, right? Like, even though we all think we're these like unique little snowflakes, we are, right? And it's like, I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's like, you're not as unique as you think you are, and blah, blah, blah. Like, there's these people that say this kind of stuff. And I'm like, bro, it's like, try and find someone who's got the same exact story as somebody else, right? There's obviously overlaps and similarities, but your personal experience and your personal story, packaging that into a message, a post, or having that be inserted into something more long form makes everything relatable, right? Because when you can, and now it's also one of the things I had the hardest time with. I was always like, oh, what the fuck does anybody give a shit about like what I've done and what's this happened and what's that? And then when I found out how to communicate my story better, those were always when I went through I do these sprints where I'll share more personal stories. I'm about to start doing the same thing. And every single time I do them, this is another one of the things where I help people in the beginning when they're not used to doing these. It helps them double and triple their income. Every time I do this, I have my biggest months by at least double. It's the strangest phenomenon. And that's why I created one of the resources, the personal story prompts and posts, because I did that 3 or 4 times. And every single time it went from, at the time, like 10, 15K in a month to 30, 35K in a month. And I'm like, repeatable. It's like, what the fuck? Like, okay, cool. I guess people give a shit about this story and like it's relatable. And, the purpose is not to be like, oh, well, I'm going to double my income by telling some personal stories. It's like, yo, when we lose touch with our message, I believe we have to go back to our stories. Right? And it's like, when we get into the mix of producing content, you guys know this. It's like you get swept up in business and doing and staying, on top of everything and like task orientation, and we lose touch with the heart of things. And when we go back to our roots, when we examine our stories, see how far we've come, there's not just the thing of like communicating your story, but it's connecting with your story, seeing how far you've come. And there's this like visceral energy that builds as well. And I believe that in the post as well, like that energy is transmitted.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a big power in sharing our stories for sure. you know, relatability. Even though it's like super unique to you, like there's typically one or two people at least that will find something in it that they can relate to, right? So it just makes you more
100%.
human. It allows them to connect with you better, and it's no wonder that your revenue also increases as a result. So it's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, it's story is one of the topics that's reoccurring both on the podcast and on our channel. It's the story brand, right? Like having your story be what bridges the gap. And you know, you see huge companies like corporations, corp relating to corpse and body, right? And the embodiment of human qualities and the stories that large companies tell in order to humanize and relate to their customers. And sometimes as humans ourselves, we fail to see our story and how we can tell that to really connect with people. Because people will always see themselves, not everybody, but the ones that you speak to will see themselves in your story in some way, shape, or form. And that's what really builds that trust. And if you do it authentically, it's what can actually lead to those massive gains, like the ones you speak about.
Yeah.
That's also the advantage of the personal brand.
No, you're 100% right. I was just going to say, just to add to that, I think like the only way you can do it is authentically. And it's like, if you try and do it from a place of like, you know, bragging or boasting, like it just doesn't work. Like it doesn't work, meaning it doesn't do anything productive. Right. And it's also one of those things where it's like, I think a lot of people, when they think personal stories, what they do is they share like whatever mess they're in right now.
That was actually a
Right? It's
trend
like, you
going
know-
around.
Yeah.
Yeah, like let's not do that. Like what's the point of that? I mean, I'm not into trends, first of all. Like I just don't do the trend thing. Like I have a very strong aversion to trends, especially when it comes to transitions or intros. But we already know that. So, but no, I think that like, you know, sharing something, I have seen a lot of that recently as well. But I think sharing something when it's still like an open wound isn't necessarily the best thing, in my opinion. Unless it's like, yo, I need support. I'm going through this thing.
Right.
It's like the phone a friend thing, right? It's like one of the things that I do on a regular basis when I get into, and for whatever reason, in the last like 6 months, I've had more moments where I've been like, felt disconnected or like disappointed or even slightly depressed, right? And the first thing I do, I'm like, yo, I call a buddy. I'm like, yo, you got a minute just to chat? Like, can you just hear me out for a second? And they're like, and then they ask me a couple questions. I'm like, oh, thanks, buddy.
That's great for
We're good.
mental health too, right?
Yeah.
I love that.
Clarity.
Yeah.
For sure.
I feel like us females, like that's totally normal to us, you know, ever since.
Yo, it's not, it never was never normal for us, for dudes at least, right? It's like, I could do it on my own.
Yeah, that's kind of like, the like macho men culture, I guess, that unfortunately was instilled in you guys. But
I like to call a friend.
yeah, you're a good communicator, so you got that. But I've been with some guys and also like had some guy friends who are not used to doing that. Like they just bottle everything in. So
Yeah, most guys I would say are not, that's not normal for them. They would be like, oh, I don't want to bother anybody, or like, you know, they're busy, or like, oh, you know, like that's the typical thing that dudes will do. They'll make excuses like that.
yeah. All right, so we touched on the personal story being a really good piece of content that, you know, coaches, creators, everybody can basically leverage for themselves. And I would actually call that more of an evergreen piece, right? Because your story is your story and people can keep coming
For
back
sure.
to it and connecting with yourself, connecting with them. So what are some ways to keep your content fresh and engaging over time? I mean, okay, so you don't like trends, fair enough. So how do you go about keeping your content fresh? Is it talking about what's currently happening in your life, or a new, you know, strategy or tip that you have, or what works for you?
No, I mean, I think this is actually something that I personally struggle with, right? Because like I'm a person of routine. So it's like if you look at my Instagram feed, you're going to see that back wall,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's going to be the camera and this angle, and it's going to be a very like cinematic look, and it's going to be pretty face to camera style. I've been experimenting with more storytelling stuff. I think changing the style is for me, at least one of the ways that I try and switch up my content. So like, instead of just going like instructional, like this is what I'm talking about, here's this tip, here's this thing, here's 2 reasons why this, here's 2 tips on that, moving more into just like an off the cuff story type thing. So what I've recently started to do is do more like a story with more like cinematic music behind it and just trying to invoke more feeling. So I think one of the things that I've done over time to change up my content is to give it more definition, right? Because I think a lot of times we just get into this thing of content production where it's like, well, what's the purpose of this piece of content? So giving it, this is a straight up educational piece. I'm going to teach someone. This is straight up meant to be inspirational, or whatever other type of like category you want to put your content in. I think making sure that you're like, oh, well, let me try and do it this way, right? So I think switching it up for variety and trying on new styles is good. It also helps to flex different muscles for you as a creator. And I think we get, there's things that we're strong in. And I don't think that we should abandon ship on the things that we're strong in, because I think that's something that we get to like build a reputation for. But I think there's also a need to switch things up, right? And I think that for me, when I want to switch things up, I'll either have my phone all the time and be like, all right, cool, I'm going to just make myself take more video, or I'll take my GoPro out more often than not, or I'll make sure I have my bigger camera, my Canon, with me, and I will just make myself take a bunch of video, and I'll start to see things differently, and then I'll get ideas. So I think one of the best ways that I can say to switch things up is to just play. Like, remember why you wanted to create content in the first place. There was probably some level of excitement, and I remember every time I got a new piece of gear, specifically a new camera. It was like when I first got my GoPro, it was like I was filming fucking everything, right? I was taking it on a run. I would take it to the ocean. I would take it on a trip, and I would like have it on my backpack on the thing. And then I would like, oh, can I mount this on my car somewhere? And I'm like, can I put it here? Can I put it there? So like finding a way to like make things fun, I know for me has always been a doorway at least to other methodologies that I can utilize. And I truly believe, I think having this understanding or this belief of like no time spent creating is time wasted, that's helped me to be like, I just spent 4 hours, quote unquote, dicking around doing this other thing, but like it didn't produce anything. I think we need to get out of the mentality of always trying to be productive. And this is where like knowing what needle movers are and having those done, and then having some space to be able to experiment, or as I call dicking around, it's a very technical term, to experiment and play with some different things is important, because that's where creativity comes from, right? It's like making new connections, right? So giving yourself space to play, I think, is the number one thing.
Yeah, love that answer. Very well said.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about, or do you ever film outside? Just, go out, bring your camera. And...
Do you ever go outside, Jeff? I was actually just looking at filters because I was like, do I need an ND filter? And I was like, do we need this and do I need that? And so I'm going to be heading out to Florida for like a little over a month in the next 3 weeks. So I'm going to make assignments for myself. I'm like, all right, for this week, you can only film outside. And for this week, you can only film with your phone. And for this week, you can only film with a GoPro. And I'm like, I'm going to just have some fun and play for a minute. And have some stuff batched as well, just so I have some pieces that are already coming out and some written content as well. But then I used to film outside all the time. In fact, I don't think I ever filmed inside until I filmed inside, and then I never filmed outside. And it's like, I tend to get into these rhythms where it's just like, habits are great in that way because it builds, it automates a behavior, but they're also bad because habits can work to our detriment.
Old habits die hard, as the saying
Old
goes.
habits die fucking hard.
Yeah.
I just made that video the other day.
Wow.
Did you see that, or are you just saying that?
I just said that.
Oh, that's so funny. It's literally a title on my video. Old habits die hard.
I probably saw
I
it, and like subconsciously it popped into my head.
I love it.
Interesting. Now, when it comes to like when you're helping clients with their marketing, with their branding, with their business, what are the key elements, or what would you say are the key elements of a powerful personal brand for coaches and creators?
Love that. So one of the I would say the main kind of like the bread and butter of what I do with my folks is to offer creation, right? And the simplicity of it for me, it comes down to, you know, the 4 P's, right? The person, the problem, the promise, and the process. So it's like there's a person that you support, there's a problem they have, there's a promise that your service delivers, and then there's a process that you bring them through in order to get there, right? And when folks map that stuff out, and they go deep too, it's not surface level, right? It's like really understanding like the dreams and desires of this person, their day-to-day life, what they think about, what they fear, what they want, and then what problem they're facing, and really understanding those 4 facets deeply. And then when you have those, they're not always used directly in your messaging, but it's similar to an avatar exercise done well, right? Like when you have this person in your mind's eye, it's easier to create because you're no longer just having this like unidirectional conversation of like, I'm creating content speaking to a camera. It's like, there's this through thread of like, yo, I'm creating for this person who has this problem that I can help them with this thing that I do. And this is what they can experience on the other side.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that one fundamental understanding of being able to embed that in a good portion of your content, in my experience, is what really moves the needle for a lot of coaches and creators.
It's like the highest sense of clarity, right? Mm-hmm. We ran a workshop 2 weeks ago. We partnered with a brokerage here, so we're actually training 10 realtors right now on personal branding. And that was a question I remember asking that stopped a lot of people, and they were like, I actually haven't asked myself this question. And I started getting into your mission, your vision, your values, the purpose, the problems of the people that you're helping. And I presented them the create your avatar exercise of like, be extremely clear on who exactly you're trying to serve, and write down their story and their problems and exactly what process you're going to get them through to fulfill them on the promise, which is what you're saying. And I think where the clarity that I brought for a lot of people, as being here in Mexico, some realtors are like, oh, I want to cater to Americans, I want to cater to Canadians, I want to cater to Mexicans. And that's when I started asking, well, where do your strength lies? Did you live in America to have a connection to those people that you're going to attract them? Or if you're a Mexican born and you grew up here, where does your strength lie to be able to help those people through that journey? And that brought a lot of clarity to them, thankfully. But it's something that I think routinely you kind of have to ask yourself and revisit, I don't know, every once in a while, like 6 months or every 12 months, and just double check, like, has the needle moved a little bit? Have we progressed? Am I helping a wider or more narrow, more niche market now? And are those processes to help them optimized or improving as well?
Yeah, I think it's easy to lose touch with that though too, right? It's like the same thing when you get in the mode of like creating all the time. It's easy to lose sight of I'm creating for instead of I'm creating. Right? Like I'm creating for someone. I'm not just creating shit for the sake of creating shit.
Yeah, exactly. And it's really, really important to get clear on that, who you're helping, because that's also going to inform your messaging, right? And that's so important.
Absolutely.
Because that's like the forefront of what you put out there and how you attract those people to you and how you speak directly to their problems and desires and all these things. So how can coaches and creators master the art of messaging and attract their ideal clients?
That's a fantastic question. So I think, like anything, mastering the art of messaging is practicing the art of messaging, right? Like you can't master anything unless you exercise it, unless you practice it. So whether it's following some type of a copywriting framework or understanding like how to craft a compelling message or tell a story, like I always recommend, and I have different frameworks for this, but finding a framework and then training that one framework. Or like, don't find 10 and then try and dabble between the 10 and then be like, oh, I'm going to do this one today and then this one tomorrow. Because then you have like 10 half dug holes, right?
Guilty
it's like
of
find
that.
one or two and like strike that hammer. And I say obviously, but it's not so obvious to a lot of folks. This is with the understanding of like, don't stop what you're doing and then try and start something brand new. It's like, continue to keep the presses running. Like I had a coach back in the day who told me, he was like, he's like, Jeff, you have the tendency to like do these 180s and then start doing something completely new. And I'm like, no, I don't. You do. No, I'm just kidding. And he said, don't stop the presses, like the printing press, the money press. I was like, oh, I like that. Right. It's like, is it going to kill you to do this thing that you've been doing for a little bit longer and then transition? Like, does it really have to be a hard stop? Of course that happens sometimes, but most of the time it's integrating, not stopping and starting, right? So find one or two frameworks like problem, agitate, solve, or some type of a copywriting framework and exercise it, right? Like practice the shit out of it. Like write more, and then write more, and then write more. And then don't write in a vacuum, right? Like one of the worst ways to learn a skill is to remove feedback.
Right. Yeah.
Right. The minute you remove feedback, you learn significantly less. Like even when it comes to learning, I had this thing for a while. I was really bad at remembering people's names. So I made a deal with myself. I was like, you know what? Even if I completely forget their name, I'm going to guess.
Okay.
Because I wanted to be embarrassed by saying a name that was nowhere near what their name was.
Wow.
And so within a very short period of time, I was like, yo, I'm never going to fucking forget anybody's name ever again.
I feel like this is one of the number one problems people face. So there you go. You can use that framework.
Yeah, it's like just put the work out there. It's like write, publish, write, publish, write, publish, write, publish, write, publish. And you'll start to see that you're getting better if you actually put the work into getting better, right? So it really helps though. Like it can't be just, two-dimensional, right? It can't just be you and this piece of work. It has to go out to people, and knowing who you're writing for and knowing what you do and what you stand for and what you offer and your values and all of these things. These are all ingredients in it, right? So like the more facets, the more dimensions you can add to it, the more substance the thing has. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's like knowing all of these and knowing yourself and knowing your customer can create a fantastic message if you put the work in to understand and create that message. Now, I think one of the things when it comes to messaging and mastering messaging that people fail at is they're really afraid to have situational awareness and paint that picture of what their customer is experiencing, right? Some people refer this as like sticking the knife, twisting the knife, and like painting the picture of the pain and like, bro marketing or whatever the fuck their names are for it, right? But like done elegantly and done with empathy and done with like genuine, like one of the comments I get consistently from people is like, wow, like it makes you actually care, right? Like I can be brash, but like I deeply, deeply care, and it comes across. And I'm not afraid to say what needs to be said. Do you know why? Because it's fucking true. And when someone reads something and it's true, I'm saying it in a great way, but I'm not just saying it lightly, and I'm not just throwing it out there to like be like, oh, you're in this pain, I can help you. It's like, yo, like I understand where you're at. And I've most likely been exactly in that position. And it fucking sucks.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Most people don't come from that place.
Right. Well, there's also touching on like the pain point, right? There's the pain point marketing and then there's the desire marketing. Yeah. So you can do...
I don't think it's an either or. I genuinely don't. Like I've seen so much of this recently. Like, oh, it's like paint their desire. You're going to attract a lesser quality person. It's like, I don't agree with it.
Well, what's your take on it then? Why don't you agree?
I think both are necessary, right? It's like it can't just be, because then it just falls into this category of like sunshine and rainbows, right? Like It's not this like attraction based, everything's positive, like blah, blah. It's just not that way. It's like that's not reality. We live in duality. I'm sorry.
Nothing's black and white, right?
Yeah, you gotta
nothing
hit it
is
with
black and white, right? It's never all the time one thing, okay? And it's like there's going to be times where it's like, even in video, sometimes I'll be like, I'll touch into something and there's like a moment of like, oh, and that's just necessary. Like, it's just, none of us are immune to pain.
Yeah.
So why pretend that in our messaging? It just doesn't it feels inhumane in a way.
Yeah.
And it feels like, in a way, a, strange way of bypassing.
Yeah. I think maybe the differentiator would be if you're trying to lead through fear or lead through empathy.
Yeah.
Right. And when you lead
or
through
shame
empathy, you're
even,
saying
right?
the
Like
truth.
people's messaging can feel like it's just riddled with shame and guilt and like twisting the knife. And it's like, there are people that message and it just feels like shit. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that's okay.
A little bit
But
of
what I am
tough love
saying,
can actually be
yeah,
beneficial.
a little bit of like truth, right? It's like if someone is in pain and they're experiencing something that sucks, and I paint a picture of that is to a T what they're feeling and experiencing that I may have experienced in the past, I don't think that's a bad thing. And to pretend like it doesn't exist will miss that person.
I think if anything, they're gonna feel seen and heard.
That 100%, yes.
That part.
That exactly.
Yeah. Can you share some tactics for growing a coaching business organically on social media?
Yeah, so I think that was one of the missing pieces. It's so funny. Whenever I used to, initially, I don't get this much anymore. When I initially used to coach my clients on sending messages in the DMs, they would look at like the gut punch look of just like the stomach sinking of like, you want me to do what? It's like, if you're in a room with somebody, right? Say you're in a social gathering, and someone was like, oh, what do you do? And you're like, oh, I do this thing. And you tell them about it. And they're like, oh my God, that's fucking amazing. And then you just stare at them like this. That's what most people do online. People are liking and commenting. And then like, they think it's weird to reach out and have a conversation with this person. Right? It's like, that's not weird, right? So growing any coaching business, whatever your niche is or whatever like the topic is, whatever you coach on, if you're posting content, like, the number one way to grow it is to be as intentional as possible, right? So like being very clear with your content, being clear with your messaging, and to the best of your ability, establishing a style that feels unique and natural to you. Of course, you may borrow from other people, you may try things on, but like to carbon copy somebody or to just follow in someone's footsteps is probably not the best path, right? So like on the surface level, that's creating content that's in a unique style that feels as genuine to you as possible, right? So you have your messaging and you're putting content out there. The biggest missing piece is having genuine conversations. So whether you're in person or online, having conversations with people is gigantic. So I mean, by conversations, I mean, so if someone is, I do back it up a little bit. For me, I do enrollment periods, right? So like I'm not always trying to enroll clients. And for me, this is the fix of, okay, cool. I don't want to always be enrolling because it feels exhausting. So I'm like, all right, cool. For this 12-week sprint, here's what I have. Here's the goal, which means I can take this time off at the end. And then I'm going to come back into the 12-week sprint. So during these sprints, I'm engaging in a different way and I'm sending messages in a different way. So when I'm sending messages, I always start with when someone follows, likes, or comments, if I'm in an enrollment period, I will send a message of appreciation. And that is just a basic message that sounds something like, hey, Tom, thanks for the like. Just wanted to say I appreciate the engagement and thank you for being here. Something super simple and basic. That is a genuine thing like, oh man, appreciate that. Like you took the time to like at least hit the like button. For me, that comes from a place of like, I just genuinely am like, I like to chat. Like, hey, thanks, bro. That's it. Like it's a genuine thing. Some people don't respond. Some people do. The people that do respond, and this is for likes, for comments, and then follows sound very similar. The people that do respond oftentimes will respond with like a mini novella of like their life and like want to chat more. And they're like, oh my God, I can't believe you reached out and blah, blah, blah. Like they're genuinely excited to have a conversation. And for those folks, I have a conversation. I'm like, cool. Like, what brought you to the page? Or they're like, oh, I really like what you say, or I like how you said this, or I like I said. I'm like, all right, cool. Like what specifically like stuck out for you? Would you like to see any content on that? Yeah, I'd like to see more on this or this. So at the least, they're giving me content ideas. Then what I'll do is within a week, I'll send them a freebie, right? So I'm like, hey, just wanted to follow back up, check in, see how things are going, and see if you downloaded the personal story prompts and posts. And if they're like, no, I haven't seen it, I'd be like, dope, here's the link if you want to grab it. Simple. And then continue to follow up. And I even have I have a spreadsheet. I have it old school way, right? So with people where I'm in conversation with, I have little boxes of saying like they downloaded this, they downloaded this, they downloaded that. Now, this is not for like everyone I have conversations with. You also have to keep in mind, like my services start at 8K and go up to 15. So like if I'm having 30 conversations in a month and, you know, a fraction of those convert, it's a great month. So like there's the benefit is good, right? There's payout at the end. This is not like if someone has a service that's like $500 or $1,000, like it may not be a feasible methodology. But if it's like even 3,000 or more, if you can generate 3 sales in a month just from these types of conversations, of outbound conversations, would it be worth it? I think so, right? Like if you clock the time. And you can also, there's things you can have people start the conversations. You can have people that are doing your messaging for you in the beginning, and then you come in and take it over. So you don't always have to do the heavy lifting. You can also set up automations in ManyChat where you enter people into these sequences, and then it'll automatically follow up with them in a week or do whatever. And that way you just go in and follow up after that. So it doesn't all have to be manual, but that's besides the point. The fundamental thing is like, give a shit and have a conversation. That is what it comes down to at the end of the day, right? Like, again, I'm going to just say it how it is.
And it really does help being as organized as you are. Wow. I mean, that must be tough to keep track of. I mean, we've definitely got to implement that.
You gave us
I mean, like that's the sales, like that's this particular system that I've used over the years is just like I've refined it to a plant, like to a point where it's not like I know when to focus on content and when to focus on sales and when to focus on delivery. And I can toggle between those three. And I have systems in place so that it just happens effortlessly. And it's not like this. Of course, it's work, right? It's like if anyone's going to complain about doing work, it's like, what's your other option? Right?
9 to 5.
It's like I always go to that, right? It's like, go work for somebody else. Like, it's not going to be easy. Sorry. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be candy corns and unicorns and rainbows and fairies and pixie dust and shit, right? Like, it's just not going to be that way. Those fundamentals, though, I would say are the building blocks of any coaching business, right? And it's like that's on the platform organic wise. I also think right now, like there's definitely a call for more long form content. So whether it's a newsletter, YouTube, maybe you go on Substack, maybe you use ConvertKit and do it that way. But like being able to engage with people in other places that aren't just short form content. This is not a fact. This is not based on science, but my guess is that like just short form content alone is not going to be sufficient to drive sales in the very near future. Right? I think it's like traffic and engagement and all that is decreasing. And I think people are craving, I know people are craving more depth. And I think that they're just, again, going back to the analogy, right? It's like you can't sustain on snacks, right? It's like, I don't care how many like vegan cheesy puffs you want to eat, like you're not going to feel full, Jeff.
Yeah, yes.
I'm just kidding. Right? Yeah, and it's like no amount of cheesy puff transitions are going to do it.
Cheesy puff transitions. Oh God, haven't seen that one.
No, that's not one. I just made it up.
So to add to that, I would say also having some kind of a community. We actually started a community a few months back. It's on Facebook. It's still work, but hey, at least it's another point of contact that you can create for people, whether you want to call them leads or just, friends or whatever, that you can over time nurture. So much like a newsletter, except this way you can get direct feedback. You can ask them what their problems are and like answer them in real time and build trust that way. So I think that's a really great way to connect on a deeper level nowadays, that the whole community model that's blown up.
I feel like I've realized that a lot of people have this misconception of content, that because they're sharing content, there's some sort of result that's supposed to just happen, and they forget about the social part of social media, right? So actually we've implemented this tactic of messaging people when they follow you. You mentioned it to us a few weeks back, and we've been implementing it. And like you said, we're getting people that are opening up and talking about their problems and talking about their goals, and it's actually opened up for us to have conversations with them. And also there's tactics to take part of when creating content to increase engagement, like asking questions, getting people not just when they comment like great video, it's like thanks. It's like thanks. What value did you drive from it, or have you applied the X or Y that I talked about in the content, and then continuing those conversations, having community, like an online community or somewhere where you can nurture further without the broadcast feel of social media. Those are really good tools I found.
Yeah, I love that. I'm yet to get into the whole like community thing. Like I've looked at Circle and School and other things, and I imagine I will soon, but we know YouTube is next on the calendar here. So
yeah. Well, the good thing is that a community can even become a paid community, right? So
100%
you can monetize that as well.
So when it comes to like habits, social media, business, I think habits and mindset are kind of the underlying driver to success or failure. So what daily habits do you believe are essential for coaches and creators to maintain their productivity and creativity?
Oh my God, there's so many. So I think someone who's not used to daily habits, I think first and foremost, if you haven't used any kind of time tracker, there's Toggle is one of the simplest ones. But I think it's going to sound funny, but most people are delusional about how much time they are actually working. Okay. So they're like, oh, I'm working all day. It's like, are you really working all day? Like, are you actually working on something that you have set a defined objective in a fucking period of time and said, I'm going to do this thing, and then either finished it or didn't, and then maybe moved it to the next day? So most people, when they start to track their time, they notice like, oh, like I only worked for like 3 or 4 hours today. What happened? And they get this aha moment where they're like, oh, I'm getting lost in social media, or I'm like dicking around doing this other thing, and yada, yada, yada. And I call it getting honest with your time, right? And it's like when you can get honest with your time, you can see where your time's really going, because one of the humans are very good at our ability for self-delusion. Like we're very good at deceiving ourselves and talking ourselves into or believing something that's not necessarily a fact, but it's more of a feeling, right? And we feel like we're working all day. So like having the habit of being diligent with your time is kind of the meta habit that I'm about to talk about. But like tracking your time on a daily doesn't have to be like tracking it with a time tracker. It just means putting time in your calendar to do focused work. So if you can get in the habit of saying like, today I'm working on this lead magnet, or this week I want to have one paid product put up on Gumroad and ready for people to buy, sweet. That's an objective. That is a clear objective. Most of the time when I start working with folks and they have these clearly defined objectives, they get more done in 90 days than they have in the year. And it's not because they're, unproductive. It's just because they get distracted, right? And it's like, there's a difference between productive and getting things done, right? Like getting actual items done comes down to being able to manage projects. All right. So having a system, you can just use a calendar, right? Like put in a number of hour blocks, take breaks in between. I use a Pomodoro method. So like 25, 30 minutes on, 5 minutes off, work for about 2 hours, take a 25-minute break, and then come back at it for 2 hours and then go after it, right? So make sure that you are getting honest with your time is probably the most important daily habit. The other one is to plan tomorrow tonight, right? And it's so simple, even if you don't have to plan the whole day, but even if you just sit down and you're like, what are the 3 most important things to get done tomorrow? So that when you sit down in the morning to get things done, you're like, cool, you've maybe visioned it the night before and you've been like, all right, cool, I can see I'm going to start this thing. I'm going to do this. I'm going to write a piece of content. I'm going to script a video. And that becomes the thing. That's the focus. What you also find, I'm going to go a little woo here, is that you may even have some insight in your dream, or you'll wake up with like a new idea and you'll be like, oh, I could put this in there. And it's this soft attention and this soft focus that if we put it on there, it's not just wake up and react to shit. It's wake up with intention. Okay. So planning the night before is gigantic. And then the other daily habit, it's not necessarily like a productivity habit, so to speak, but like, again, I'm going to go back to the movement thing. I think that like having some type of a practice or a movement practice, whether it's running or like anything that you can do that doesn't require like a shitload of equipment, is great, right? So yes, maybe go to the gym, but like if you're like, oh, I'm going to start biking, and then you're like thousands of dollars later buying a bike and a helmet and the gear and all the things, you're like, oh, well, that was a great idea, but now it's in the garage. Probably not the best idea. So find something simple and do that daily, period. I think that on the mindset conversation, I think that too many people spend too much time in their head. I'm going to say it that way. But I think the conversation of mindset is more of a conversation of discipline of your mind and not necessarily filling it with more stuff. I think our minds have the tendency to wander, and the simple mindset habit of having the awareness, right? Like the metacognition to be able to know when your mind drifts and to bring it back to focus is probably the most simple and most effective strategy you can utilize. Period. But then like down the line on mindset, I mean, you can go down the rabbit hole with this kind of stuff, and it's like, you know, you could go Goggins with it and callous your mind and like be able to push through anything and all kinds of this, that, and the other. But like at the end of the day, most people will do better with subtle mindset shifts than they will with drastic mindset shifts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. That last point is about keeping your focus is a big one in this attention economy, fast-paced social media world. There's, you know, we experience it often. There's so many coaches, gurus, people telling you do things this way, do things that way, that, you know, at some point you just have to realize that you have to pick your horse and ride it till you get to where you need to get. You can't ride two horses. They gallop at a different speed, and one may stop and do something else. So you just got to ride that. And I think this ties into the part that you were saying earlier of getting the feedback. So like stick to what you're doing, get some feedback so you can refocus and get, you know, make sure that you're staying on track, right? Yeah. And that your efforts and whatever you're doing is tying into the end result that you're after. It's easier said than done, staying on track and keeping your mindset on track. But
absolutely.
It's not always
about, and it's not always about staying on track either, right? Like sometimes you have to get off track to get back on track.
Yeah.
Right. So like if you're getting distracted, maybe it's because you're trying to focus for too long, or maybe it's because you're focusing on something that you don't actually give a shit about doing. Right. And it's like, oh, there's other ways than making yourself do it, right? Because then what happens is like, I need more coffee, or I need this other stimulant, or I need this, you know, nicotine pouch, or I need freaking Alpha Brain, or I need some other nootropic, or whatever the fuck, right? It's like, obviously you could tell I've been there. So I think it's more of a conversation of like, how do I make sure that I'm staying on task and not getting distracted and doing things that matter?
Yeah.
So how do you encourage your clients then to develop that endurance and overcome resistance to the business journey?
Well, as far as developing endurance goes, it's the best way to develop endurance is to have things that you're building endurance for. So, right, like if someone has the tendency to get distracted, what I'll typically recommend is that they have something to put their attention on other than just whatever it is in the business, right? So that means like, what is it that you can learn on the side, right? Is there a subject that you want to learn more about? Is there something like most people are distracted going down like these random rabbit holes. It's like, what if you had this topic that you wanted to learn more about, whether it's something specific in spirituality or consciousness or science or, you know, human behavior or psychology or whatever, and learn about it. Like have structured time where you're learning or reading about a specific thing. And if you have like a personal development calendar, if you will, of things that you are learning and educating yourself on, it's not as easy to get distracted because then it comes at the cost of the thing you said you want to do, right? So it's less for me and for those I work with, it's less about like, don't get distracted, stay focused. It's more of like, well, if you do that thing, then you're going to have to go against what you said you actually want.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's a good point. Betraying yourself as a result.
Yeah. Well, it's like, you know, and maybe you just said you wanted it because it was something to pick, but it's like, cool. If not that, then something else, right? Like, you know, for me, when I get back from Florida, I'm like, I'm going to do hip hop classes at night because I want to learn how to dance hip hop. And that's going to make it so that I have this other thing that I'm focused on, that I'm developing a skill in, because I just want to do that. Like, I want to be able to throw that down at a party. That's all.
No way. I don't know why, but I can definitely see you doing that with your hats, you know, like just that whole vibe. Something about the hats that just make you look like you could be a hip hop dancer.
Just break out into dance.
Yeah.
It reminds me of that sticky note that we have on our whiteboard upstairs. That says, is this task moving you towards or away from your goals? And it's something that we often look at and we're like, okay, maybe we're not putting time towards the thing that's going to move the needle and we're putting it towards something else. That's our little sticky note to help us keep on track.
Well, it's actually more specifically related to sales. So it's like, is this moving you closer to a sale? If yes, keep going. If no, stop and ask yourself what will.
Yeah.
I love that. That's the best. The music to my ears.
Taken from Joel Kaplan.
So
not
good.
our idea, but it's a great one nonetheless. So what role does mindset play in achieving, you know, business goals, and how can one cultivate a winning mindset?
That's great. I think, you know, to follow suit with the same thing of it's where you put your attention. It's like, what does a winning mindset mean to you, right? So I was thinking about this the other day, actually. I was like, you know, what's your definition of a good day, right? Like, if you get to the end of the day and you say to yourself, today was a great fucking day. Like, if you had to come up with a one line for that, what would it be? For me, it was like, I did everything I said I was going to do. That's a good day for me. Right? It's like I said I was going to do this and it got done. Whether it was go to the gym or it was, you know, do a longer FaceTime with my daughter or like whatever it is, right? Like that thing happened. I said I was going to do it and I followed through. Like that's a good day, right? And it's the same thing with mindset. And a winning mindset is like, if I have a winning mindset, that means that X, Y, and Z. And having that definition becomes the focus, right? So for me, a winning mindset would mean that I stay focused on the things that matter most to me and that make me feel like overwhelmed with gratitude, like really, really fulfilled.
I love that.
Yeah. And so to develop that winning mindset is just developing the ability to do what needs to be done in order to feel how you want to feel. Neville Goddard was an author back in the day. He said to imagine the feeling of the wish fulfilled.
Okay, right? Yeah.
And it's like when I'm imagining myself at the end of a day or like winning, right? It's like, how do I feel when I'm winning, right? It's like, do I feel disappointed or sad? No, I feel unstoppable. I feel proud. I feel grateful. Like I feel appreciation for everything I just went through, and I feel stronger. And I also feel relaxed at the same time. Like there's this quality of like, I did what I could do and I left it all out on the field. Right? So like letting those feelings be the compass and moving into the direction of those feelings constantly, right? Like every decision you make, right? It's like, if you have the ability to focus, awesome. If you're constantly distracted, are you proud of the fact that you just spent 3 hours on Instagram? Probably not. So don't do it, right? Like find a way to make it so that it doesn't happen. Like set up Opal, set up a blocker, like have a time thing, like make sure, like developing a winning mindset comes down to training for me 100% of the time. So training in the direction of who you want to be and what you want to feel, period.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you almost give like the hard answers, you know, like a lot of people are looking for, you know, quick fixes or
there's no quick fixes.
Like a quick win to something, but really it's, there is none. You just have to put in the work, put in practice, develop those positive habits. And that's the best way at winning, I think, over a long period of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our last question is, how do you help your clients fall in love with the process of marketing and selling?
I love that. It's different for everybody. Like for me, I fall in love with like video, right? Like I love gear. So, one of the things I did was last year was design my office and build this whole thing out. That was the thing. That was like the carrot on a stick. That was like, all right, Jeff is going to create more content if he has a great space to create content in and great gear to create content with. I don't suggest that for everybody. That was a goal for me, and I had a budget, which I went over aggressively. But the point is, it got me to fall in love with the process because I was able to create certain things and effects that I wanted to create, like lighting effects and like the dramatic, like one-sided lighting, and just have a particular aesthetic, right? So for me, falling in love with it was that. For other people, it's not that, right? It's being able to create and sit down and create a ritual around something, right? So that may be like lighting some Palo Santo or like doing whatever and like having a cup of cacao or coffee and sitting down with having music on and creating content, right? Like whatever it is that will inspire them to get into the zone of creativity. It could be going to a coffee shop or co-working with a bunch of people, right? It's like, it's different for everybody. Like that to me is kryptonite. Like you go put me in a room with a bunch of people and the last thing I want to do is work. Like I want to just like socialize and chat, right? Like I don't want to sit down and focus when there's people to play with. Like this is not going to happen, right? So everyone's got a different, kind of thing that pulls the trigger for them, I guess, right? A different thing that works for them, and I help them find that thing.
Okay.
Beautiful.
That's awesome.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
All right, well,
so tell us where could our listeners find you? How can they contact you? What's the best way for them to work with you if they want to learn more about how you can help them build up their business and help them focus on those money-making activities that are going to turn their business around?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the main website is jeffa.co. And that'll go to the main one, which is jeffagostinelli.com. But obviously that's hard to spell. So jeffa.co is the easiest way. And links for Instagram and everything are there, as well as a coaching page just to see what my coaching is about. All the podcast is on there from a few years back, as well as all the recent articles and a ton of content and resources.
Awesome. We'll also make sure to
Perfect.
put them in the description and some of them on the screen in case you want to contact
Awesome, man.
Jeff. Go ahead and do so.
And make sure to subscribe to his YouTube too, so you can hold him to
Yes. Hold me to it. It's
Jumpstart
happening.
you.
jumpstarting your YouTube again. Can't wait to see it.
Awesome. Sweet. Well, this was fun, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us today. Very high value conversation. We got a lot out of it, and I'm sure our listeners and viewers did as well. So really appreciate you taking the time to offer this transformational value to all of us. Thank you. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this episode, I know that you're going to love our last conversation with Anthony Gugliotta, photographer and content creator with over 800,000 followers across all platforms, where he shares how to grow a successful personal brand online and the content workflow and business side of content creation.
So give us a thumbs up, subscribe, and make sure to comment your biggest aha moment you got from our conversation with Jeff.
We'll see you in the next one. Peace.